Hi, I'm Father Joseph Mary, and welcome back to A Simple Word, where we reflect on the gospel for the coming Sunday. Context is always crucial for understanding the gospel writer's intent, and this Sunday the context has radically changed. That's because from what we've heard in last week's gospel to what we'll hear this Sunday, we've skipped over almost an entire chapter in Luke. When we begin this Sunday's gospel, Jesus has already arrived in Jerusalem. What did we miss? We missed the multitude of people coming out to greet him with royal acclamation. We missed Jesus weeping over Jerusalem's failure to recognize the time of her visitation. We missed Jesus entering the temple and driving out the money changers with righteous fury. The tension level in Luke's gospel has reached a fever pitch. And now Jesus begins to teach. And straight away, here comes the vocal opposition. First, it's the chief priest, the scribes, the elders, who demand, "Tell us by whose authority you do these things." They were enraged and looking for any excuse to arrest him and have him put to death. Next, the chief priest and the scribes try entrapment. Is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And again, Jesus gives them an answer they can't contest. Again, he leaves them dumbfounded and frustrated. But worse, he's winning the crowd. More and more people are flocking to him, and the religious leaders are getting desperate. That brings us to Sunday's gospel. Luke begins, some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection, came forward and put a question to Jesus. So the chief priests, the scribes, the elders, they've had their shot at Jesus. Now the Sadducees take aim. It's important to know something about the Sadducees, because we often lump them together with the Pharisees when in reality they were at opposite ends of the cultural and theological spectrum. In some ways, the Sadducees were the rival of the Pharisees. The only thing that united them was their fierce opposition to Jesus. The Pharisees were a large religious body within Judaism, but they had no political ambitions. Their sole regard was for living out all the rules and tenets of the law. The Sadducees, on the other hand, were a relatively small group of wealthy priests and aristocrats. They were a governing class and collaborated closely with the Roman Empire. Whereas the Pharisees accepted the scriptures and all the thousands of ceremonial laws as absolutely binding, the Sadducees accepted only those things contained in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible attributed to Moses. And according to their reading, the Pentateuch made no mention of an afterlife, no mention of a humanity that perdured beyond the grave, no mention of angels or spirits. The Sadducees were the materialists of their time. And so they come to Jesus with this theological riddle. And it basically goes something like this. According to the Levirate law, if a man dies leaving his wife childless, it was the obligation of his brother to marry the widow and ensure she bear a child. Now in their example, there's 7 brothers. And as they each die in succession, the next marries the same widow over and over, as each previous husband had failed to provide her with a child. And finally, the widow herself dies. Now, say the Sadducees, in this fabled afterlife of yours, there will be 7 brothers who are all married to the same woman. Imagine the awkward tension. So whose wife will she be? Again, all of this was based on the Sadducees' reading of the Pentateuch, which they said made no mention of an afterlife. So they think they finally have Jesus stumped. The ridiculous situation was meant to demonstrate the absurdity of an afterlife. But as always, Jesus is about 1,000 steps ahead of them. Jesus quotes a passage from Exodus, the 2nd book in the Pentateuch. Moses was fearfully approaching the burning bush when God called out, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Yet Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had died long generations before Moses. Yet the Lord says in the present tense, I am their God, for to God all are alive, because there is a life beyond death. The problem, Jesus tells them, is that you're trying to wrap your limited, fallible little brain around eternity and divinity. You're thinking of the resurrection as no more than an extension of earthly human history. You have no idea what lies beyond the grave. You have no idea what God has planned for those who love him. Jesus assures them in the coming age, the age of the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. The purpose for which marriage was instituted will have passed away. But that brings us to an important question. What happens to our human relationships when we die? If the indissoluble bond of marriage is broken by death, what relationship will spouses have in heaven? I remember when my mom lost her battle with cancer about 6 years ago. She and my dad had been married for over 40 years. They had truly become one body. And I remember the question that was tormenting my dad was, when I die, will she still be my wife in heaven? Using this Sunday's gospel, the Capuchin preacher to the papal household, Father Raniero Cantalamessa, he gave the following answer. Marriage does not come to a complete end at death, but is transfigured, spiritualized, and freed from the limits that mark life on earth. Life is transformed, not taken away. Marriage will be transfigured, not nullified. The love that united spouses, even if only for a brief time, remains. Defects, misunderstandings, the suffering they inflicted on each other, those will fall away. They will all be transformed into glory. I'm Father Joseph Mary. Thanks for listening to A Simple Word. If you found this reflection helpful, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.